All right, thank you so much, guys, for coming. So today we're going to do the adult heart and the fetal heart. We'll talk about the circulation of blood through the heart and to the body, and also to the lungs to collect oxygen, and then also where else does the blood go to? It goes to the body and then goes to the lungs to pick up oxygen. Where else does the blood also have to go to? What's that? The heart itself, yeah, which is the coronary circulation. Okay, and so we'll also talk about the blood circulation and the blood vessels that take blood to the heart muscle itself. All right, and it seems in the modules, most of the trouble you had was tracking blood through the heart. All right, and some of the structures, you know, internally in the heart. So we'll go through those. And also some of the characteristics of the cardiac muscles, all right? And we'll kind of go through that a little bit more, all right? So we'll go ahead and just talk about the general functions of the heart, right? So it's a pump, pretty much, that generates blood pressure. It generates enough pressure to force the blood through all the parts of the body. So it generates the force that's required to distribute blood carrying nutrients and oxygen to the rest of the body. All right? And then, of course, the network of blood vessels is responsible for routing the blood to the parts. So every single part of the body has capillaries that distribute blood to the body parts. So we have the pulmonary circulation, where the oxygen is picked up, you know, in the lungs, and then the systemic circulation, where oxygen is deposited in the cells. All right. In the modules, it talked about, you know, when the heart beats, the right side contracts, and then the next beat, the left side contracts, and it was a true or false thing. And some of you had problems with that as well. So what happens is that there may be two circulations going on, but it is simultaneous. All right? The pulmonary circulation and the systemic circulation are going on at the same time. All right? So the sequence of contraction is that the atria, both left and right, will contract at the same time, and the ventricles, both left and right, will contract at the same time. So that blood is constantly being pumped like this to the lungs, to the body, and back to the lungs, to the body, and back. And those circulations are, you know, simultaneous. Okay? All right, so, and then of course, regulates blood supply, because the cardiovascular system has the blood vessels right at the junction of the arterial and the capillary. They are sphincters, which regulate entry of blood into that area. So areas are perfused with blood depending on oxygen need and nutrient need. So if oxygen and nutrients are not required in great amounts, then those sphincters can close. And that area is not perfused with blood. Okay, if they were not these sphincters, let's for instance say that, what do you think might become problematic if blood just goes and pulls up in areas where it's not really needed? What do you foresee may be some of the problems that could happen if we didn't have these sphincters that regulate entry of blood in certain areas, in all the areas of the body? What do you think would happen, guys?
What is like valves?
Yeah, there are valves that are, you know, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, well, black flow is prevented by the valves in the vein. So, okay.
What sphincters are you talking about?
The sphincters I'm talking about are at the junction of the arterial and the capillary, and this is in the arteries. Okay. So there's a sphincter. It's a muscle that will stop blood flowing to a certain area, depending on whether that area needs oxygen or, you know, nutrients. So what I'm saying is, what if we didn't have these sphincters and blood just goes everywhere, regardless of the need of oxygen? Huh? The heart, but the blood is gone somewhere else already.
She's run out of like blood circulating, so it would just constantly be backing up in areas.
Well, and then what could happen if blood backs up in areas? Yes, you're on the right track now.
Like swelling.
Well, yeah, swelling. But the bigger thing that I'm afraid of is clotting. You know, blood can clot, and if you get clots, what happens? It's circulated into the smaller blood vessels, and if it happens to get stuck in a coronary artery, you know, the heart will stop. So blood is only, distributed to areas that need it to prevent that problem. Because if blood kind of pulls up in areas, it can start to clot. And then, you have problems. So that's why blood has to be regulated that way. You can't just deposit blood just because the heart is pumping. All right? Okay, so in the exam, those are some of the questions I may ask in terms of, okay, what is the systemic circulation? Okay, why is blood regulated to areas of the body? And then you say some of those things. You talk about, of course, blood may pull up, you create edema. And then when that happens, the worst thing that would happen is, of course, clotting. And then, God forbid, that clot moves and blocks smaller blood vessels upstream. Then the brain and you get a stroke if it goes into the brain. My God, it's too bad. Pulmonary embolus. That would really suck. So very important. All these things that have to happen. All right. So again, those are the two circulations: the systemic and the pulmonary circulation, which I say are going on simultaneously. All right. So the pulmonary circulation, blood will flow from the heart to the lungs and back to the heart again. All right. So what is it doing? What's the purpose of the pulmonary circulation? To do what?
Blood to the body.
Pulmonary. It's pulmonary circulation.
Blood to the lungs.
Yeah, so
And do what?
Oxygenate it, send it back
Yeah,
to the body.
collect oxygen. So it's to collect oxygen. All right. So that's the pulmonary circulation. So if I ask what's the function of the pulmonary circulation, you know what it's doing, right? It's picking up oxygen at the lungs. And then, of course, systemic circulation is blood flow to the rest of the body, and back to the heart. All right. And the purpose of the systemic circulation is to do what?
Provide oxygen
To the cells and pick up carbon dioxide. All right. So you know the functions of the systemic circulation. You know the functions of the pulmonary circulation. You know that these circulations are going on simultaneously. Okay. Just remember that because they're going on at the same time. So the atria are contracting at the same time. The ventricles are contracting at the same time. So which of the heart chambers contract first, the atria or the ventricles? Yeah, the atria or the ventricles? Yeah, right? Guys, you read did you do the module? You all got high marks. So the atria will be the receiving chamber, so they have to contract first. And it has to be in order now, because if there's haphazard contraction, then you get fibrillation, and that's not good. All right? So the atria have to contract first, and then when they're good and done with that, then the ventricles contract. You don't want the ventricles to be contracting while the atria are also contracting at the same time. Okay? Because that would be really bad. All right? Okay, so location and shape is another thing you can have trouble with, in the module in terms of where the heart is located. So pretty much the heart is to the left of the midline, a little bit to the left. So more or less like maybe 2/3 of the heart is to the left and the other third is on the right side. But one of the big things is that why it so much feels like it's really way on the left is that the apex of the ventricles points towards the left. And the ventricles are the bigger and stronger muscles of the heart. So you really feel the heartbeat on your left side. Okay, even though it's kind of sort of to the left of the midline. So it's left of the midline. Of course, it's anterior to the vertebral column. It's in front of it. And then posterior to the sternum. Okay, because sometimes I may ask you to describe the location of the heart, and you would have to talk in those terms. And seems you had problems with that in the module again. It is located between which two organs? The lungs. It's central. It's between the lungs. Right? Sometimes the way the module asks questions, it kind of confuses. Yeah. It gets it. Because it really tries to see if you know. You know what I'm saying?
Really read it.
You have to really get it. You have to read the question also, the question very properly. I found that myself because I do the modules. so it tricks you. It really makes sure you know the material. And it asks you the same question again in a different way, and then if you get it, then it knows that you know.
I feel like the baby portion of it.
Yeah.
That part's
Yeah, that part sad. I saw some of it. Yeah, okay, but we'll go through some of it. Okay, because in the baby section, I just need you to know the fetal cardiovascular adaptations and what happens. What are the changes after them? Those are the important part of that. Okay, so and of course it's deep to the fifth intercostal space. In from the second intercostal space to the fifth intercostal space. All right. So the intercostal space, the second one, it kind of spans that length of the heart, and it's of course above the diaphragm. It's superior to the diaphragm. All right. So that's that. So the location of the heart is not that hard to come up with. You just think of where your heart is, and then you know the body parts surrounding it, and that shouldn't be a problem. Of course, it's a blunt-shaped cone. Okay, kind of sort of like this, right? And then these are, the ventricles and the atria are there, right? And it's kind of like an inverted triangle because the base is on the top and the apex is on the bottom. You see what I'm saying? Okay, very good. So the shape of, the location of the heart is it's about the size of your fist, roughly. So if your heart gets bigger, you get problems, right? Such as when your heart is trying to work hard, it gets bigger and bigger to try and compensate, especially if your blood pressure is high because there's too much resistance or other problems or too much fluid in the system. Okay, and then it will run out of space inside your thoracic cavity, and then it will, because we'll talk about the fibrous pericardium too, which actually limits how the heart contracts, and so it won't be able to fit in that, and then it's like it's suffocated, it's stifled, it's not going to beat properly. You get problems. So that's the second intercostal space. That's the fifth intercostal space. So that's where the heart is, and it's kind of left of the midline. It's behind the sternum, in front of the vertebral province. So just think about that whenever you ask to describe the location of the heart. All right? So we talk about the anatomy of the heart. We talk about the major blood vessels into and out of the heart. We talk about some of the external structures, which we're going to be doing next lab on Friday. We'll be doing the heart after we finish with the eye. So kind of coincides a little bit. So of course there's two atria. Okay, two atria are covered by the auricles, right? Which are kind of they look like a beret, that head. That was big back in the 60s. I think he didn't put it on anymore, the females. But it looks like that.
Army wears berets.
The army wears berets, the red berets or something like that, whatever they call because of what they wear here. But those auricles kind of extend the atria, the chamber of the heart, to give more volume. And of course, two ventricles, and then of course the pericardium I was talking about. There's actually two pericardia, because it's Latin, so it's plural with an A at the end. The fibrous pericardium is really tough fibrous connective tissue on the outside, and this is the one that I was saying limits how the heart, beats, so that it's in a finite space. So you don't want the heart to grow now, because if it grows, then it won't be able to beat, to expand and contract properly. Then you've got two serous membranes. The serous membranes do the job we talked about. Remember last time in AMP1. So there's the visceral one, which is in close contact with the heart, which is also sometimes called the epicardium. And then there's the parietal pericardium, which is the second one. And between them, there's going to be what kind of fluid? Serous fluid, because the serous membrane. Okay. Serous fluid, what does it do?
Lubricates.
Yeah, so a lubrication for the serous membranes and the fibrous one limits the extent to which the heart expands. Right. So there's really three layers here. The two that form the serous membranes, visceral, parietal, and the one on the outside, which is the fibrous. The serous and the visceral and parietal, between them there's fluid, so that one reduces friction when the heart is beating. Right? So these two are serous. All right? And then, of course, this one is the fibrous one, which limits expansion. All right? And I will also talk about this later. Limits expansion of the heart.
Which one?
The fibrous one, the one on the outside. So there's three layers of membranes here, right? You see that? But they're normally divided into two, the serous ones and the fibrous ones. All right? Okay, very good. Okay, and so we talked about the fibrous, of course, limits the expansion of the heart. It anchors and it protects the heart. It anchors it in space so that it's not moving, especially when it beats and so forth, and prevents overfilling of the heart because it limits how it will expand. So, right. What might be the function of prevention of overfilling? What happens when the heart overfills, number one? What happens to the muscle cells of the heart? Well, they have to be, to damage them, what will be happening to them? Yeah, they're overstretched. Okay, remember when we did that tension, contraction relationship of muscles? What happens when the muscle is overstretched?
There's tendons.
Well, yeah, it does that, but I'm talking about its ability to contract, in terms of its ability to contract. Remember the muscle tension thing? So you're increasing the force here, and there's the tension, there's the contraction up here. Okay, so if you're overstretched, the contraction is little. See what I'm saying? So the muscle has to be the correct, nice, optimum length for it to contract effectively. If it's too short, it's not going to contract. If it's too straight, it's not going to contract strongly. Okay? So if the heart overfills, it won't be able to really contract and push the blood out.
Kind of like the Alaskan number.
Yeah.
If it's too stretched out, it's never going to hold up.
Yeah, it's never going to hold up. Right now I get to do my belt and I got tweets all over the place because I need to reduce the waste of my thing. So the overfilling, it can cause the heart not to beat with enough strength. If you look at your notes in AMP1, when we're talking about muscle contraction, you'll see that length, tension of the muscles, and the ability to contract. So that's important, because if the heart is not beating, you're not pumping blood to the system. So, okay, so those are some of the things I will need you to kind of add to the facts. Like why do we need to prevent overfilling? Because then it will affect the contraction, the length and contraction, strength. Too much stretch, less contraction. Because the force of contraction will be less when the heart contracts. All right, very good. So, and then of course the serous pericardium made of the two layers, visceral, very close to the heart, visceral, soft tissue, and then of course the parietal on the outside with the serous fluid in the middle for lubrication. So that when the heart is contracting like that, it's not brushing on these other organs, and it allows it to be relatively friction-free, because nothing is ever 100% efficient. Will totally wipe out all the friction. But it happens, the friction is so little that it doesn't affect the function of the heart. All right? Okay, so those two membranes, you gotta know their functions, and you gotta know why they exist in the first place. All right? If you don't have lubrication, the heart is gonna be inflamed. You get problems too. And then there's also this problem, like if you get shot and maybe blood starts to get in there, or if the membranes, the serous membranes, get inflamed and that pericardial space starts to fill up with fluid or other fluids because of inflammation and pus or whatever, and then what will happen to the heart again? it will start to get stifled again. It won't be able to beat. So you can give many reasons about why we need all these things. Very important, right? Okay. And the good thing about these reasons is that most of them are intuitive. They kind of make sense. You know, you don't have to stretch your imagination to see the importance of that. And when something like that, you know, it's easy to learn. All right? So there we go. So those are the three layers I was talking about. Remember, I said the visceral layer is also sometimes called the epicardium because it's the first connective tissue membrane that is in close contact with the heart. All right? And then the other layer is the myocardium, of course, which is myo means myo, like myosin and stuff. Where do you get myosin? Muscle. Muscle. Myo means muscle. So this is the muscle of the heart. All right. So this is the muscle of the, and it forms the bulk of the heart wall. Right. The muscle is very important because that's what it contracts on. Right. That's what provides the force of contraction. The muscles do that. And then, of course, so we know this layer, and we said it's the visceral layer, all right, part of the serous membranes, and we know the myocardium is the muscle of the heart. It's a cardiac muscle, very specialized muscle. We're going to talk about the characteristics of it that make it special. That's not a B, that's a P. Endocardium. The endocardium has got to be smooth or rough. It's inside here, that's very correct. But is it smooth or rough? The endocardium. It's got to be smooth. Why? Yeah, it reduces friction. What else? Another very important thing again. Because blood is moving inside of the heart. Remember we said we need a smooth surface in the blood vessels as well? Why? Why do we need a smooth surface in there? Why does this have to be very smooth? It reduces friction, which is good. Yes, yes. What else? Remember what happens when blood comes across a rough surface? It clots again, yeah. So you don't want the blood to clot in there because, God forbid, it goes into the coronary artery and boom, it's going to block one of the heart vessels. Right? Then you get problems. Okay, so it reduces friction and it also reduces, it prevents the clotting. The smoothness of the endothelial lining reduces clotting of the blood, which is also very important. So you have many reasons why the endothelium, the endocardium is smooth, right? So you got all those membranes now, and this is another part of the module that we have problems with in terms of identifying some structures in the heart. So internally, the ventricles have what are called trabeculae carni. Literal meaning, literal translation, carni is
Meat.
flesh, like carne asada. Remember carne asada? You guys like that? Yeah. Okay. So carne is meat, flesh. Trabeculae, beams of flesh. That's what it means. Okay, beams of flesh, and these are sort of you know, when you open the heart, you will see them. They're kind of sort of beams of, you know, mounds inside there, the heart, and those are in the ventricles. And then we will talk about what's in the atria too. Remember the atria, the chamber itself of the atria is kind of smooth, but remember those extensions I was talking about, the ones I was calling barrel looking like, they are the auricles. The auricles have also little ridges in there, okay, called musculi pectinati, sometimes called pectinate muscles, all right? Musculi pectinati, so this is in the atria, especially the auricle part. Trabeculae carni would be in the ventricles. And when you open the heart, you'll be able to see these. So I want you to be able to identify which kind of sort of grooves and so forth that are located in there. They may be oriented in a way that sort of channels blood towards the valves, like in the atria. The musculi pectinati are kind of oriented towards the atrioventricular valves so that the blood kind of sort of heads down there. I guess that could be another function of those, right? And then in the ventricles, they kind of sort of heading up because the blood is squeezed out of the heart to go up pulmonary trunk in the aorta. Okay? Because it's kind of hard to channel. If it's, remember, the surface is smooth inside of the heart, and if you just apply pressure on that stuff and the surface is smooth, it's like the blood doesn't have anywhere to go. It's like guiding. You know what I'm saying? It sort of guides. So those kind of beams guide the blood to kind of sort of go down. Because you don't want the blood to be like just, you know. Can you sort of envision that? Otherwise, it will just be all smooth and there will be none of these beams inside of the heart. Right?
So that steps for direction.
It kind of guides the blood, yeah. Because you don't want to just apply the pressure on the blood and the whole surface is so smooth because the endocardium has to be really smooth. All right, so these beams are also smooth. All right, but they kind of sort of lead the blood so that when you put the pressure on the blood goes down. When you put the pressure down in the ventricles, the blood goes up. They kind of sort of guide because it has to be smooth inside. And if you just apply pressure and it's so all smooth wall throughout, the blood is kind of like, where am I going to go? You know, it will kind of not be efficient in terms of going in the correct direction. And also the way the heart contracts as well, it kind of contracts from the bottom going up, right? So if you appreciate some of the value of these structures, they are easier for you to kind of sort of remember them, rather than just remember, okay, muscle pectinate in the atrium and trabecular canyon for what? For why? You know what I'm saying? So, so this is just a heart wall showing the epicardium on the outside, the muscle, of course, and then of course the, you see the trabecular canyon over there, all right? In the ventricles, all right. So there you go. Continue on with the anatomy of the heart, all right? So the atria, these are the receiving chambers of the heart, and blood comes to the left or to the right side from the body. From the body, yeah, it comes to the right. Yeah. I think you said left, but it's another heart attack or something. So it comes to the right side through which three blood vessels? Got the superior vena cava, right? What else?
Left and right pulmonary veins.
No. It's
from the
depositing. The blood from the heart comes from the. It's in the coronary signs. So what's the third one? I told you the inferior. And I told you the superior actually, and the inferior. So in the so you get. So there you go. So those are them. They deposit into the right atrium. So now we have to track the movement of blood. Like if I was to say a blood vessel, or I mean a blood cell, a red blood cell comes into the heart on the right. Which structures does it pass through? So on the right side, it has to pass through the tricuspid valve, right? Yeah, to get into the ventricles, and we will kind of cover that later on. All right. So inferior vena cava, superior and coronary sinus. All right. And then it goes out through the right ventricle through the pulmonary trunk. It's really a pulmonary artery, but then it leaves as the trunk because it will split into the left and right pulmonary arteries. All right. If you say pulmonary artery, it's still fine. All right. And then it will come back to the left atrium through 4 pulmonary veins carrying oxygenated blood. They're just called veins because they're heading towards the heart, but they're carrying oxygenated blood. And 2 from the left side, 2 from the right side. All right? So those are them. All right? So we know on the right side, we get the superior, inferior vena cava, coronary sinus, depositing into the right atrium, goes through the tricuspid valve, goes into the right ventricle, comes out through the pulmonary trunk or pulmonary artery, all right? Comes back to the left side of the heart, to the left atrium, via 4 pulmonary veins, 2 from each side, all right? So obviously, you've got to know the major blood vessels into and out of the heart, all right? And so the ventricles are called discharging chambers because they discharge blood into either the pulmonary circuit or the systemic circuit. The blood goes to the pulmonary circuit, through the pulmonary trunk, right? And it goes to the systemic circuit through the major artery. The blood goes to the systemic circuit through which blood vessel? The aorta, yes, the aorta, right? Right. So we know that, and we know that we have trabeculae carni in the walls of the ventricles, right? On top of that, there are little pimple-like muscles called papillary muscles, all right? And these are connected to string-like structures, all right, that are connected to the bicuspid valve and the tricuspid valve, all right? And these prevent the valves from backing up or prolapsing into the atria when the ventricles contract. So when the ventricles contract, those flaps on the valves fill up with blood and then close up. And then those papillary muscles kind of tug a little bit on those string-like structures so that it doesn't to resist the force going up into the atrium, right? Okay, so the discharging chambers are the ventricles, the receiving are the atria. So moving on with anatomy of the heart. So the external anatomy, we get a division between the atria and the ventricles, right? Okay. It's kind of lopsided. And this is really supposed to be way up there. So this division between the atria and the ventricle is the coronary sulcus. It's like a sulcus, remember, is kind of like a groove, like a groove that separates. And there's fibrous tissue that runs through there. So it separates and then the coronary blood vessels kind of run through there. So, and I'll show you a picture later on. So separates the two ventricles and the two atria. And of course, I said the atrial volume is expanded by the auricles, which I said they look like the rays on top. And then, of course, the interventricular groove will separate the right and left ventricles. All right? So that's that. Coronary sulcus goes across, and then the right and left ventricles are kind of separated by that kind of sort of. It's a diagonal. The interventricular groove is. All right, and then there is a divider between the two atrium called the interatrial septum, right? And some of the fetal cardiovascular adaptations occur on the interatrial septum, all right? In an attempt to divert the lungs, and we'll talk about that in the end. And then, of course, the interventricular septum separates. It's like a beam of muscle, cardiac muscle, that separates the two chambers, the ventricles, interventricular septum, and then of course the atria, interventricular, interatrial septum and interventricular septum, right? And then I'm going to mention, of course, that the fossa ovalis is the remnants of what would have been the hole between the left and right atrium called the foramen ovale, all right? The foramen ovale, of course, will shunt blood from the right atrium to the left atrium. Why? So that it doesn't go to the lungs, okay? Because the right atrium leads to the right ventricle, which leads to the pulmonary trunk, which goes to the lungs. You don't want that. Because in the fetus, they're not breathing in air, so the lungs are non-functional. So we have to divert the blood. So that's one of the early fetal cardiovascular adaptations I'm going to bring right now, because we're talking about the interatrial septum. So this interatrial septum will have like a hole going from one atrium to the other, from the right to the left, because the left comes to the systemic circulation. All right. So gotta know this coronary sulcus separates the atrium and ventricles. The interventricular groove separates the ventricles. Right. And then of course interatrial septum. The two is the divider between the atrium. Interventricular septum is the divider between the two ventricles. So we're looking at the heart here, and this is a real heart. Of course, you can see interventricular groove, and then the coronary sulcus going across like that, and then you get, of course, the pulmonary tract over here, and then the aorta over there, all right, and then superior and inferior vena cava, all right, and then of course the coronary sinus take with blood from the heart deposited also on the right side, all right. You can see that the interventricular septum is not central, or the ventricular groove, all right. So the right side will be smaller, and the left ventricle will be much bigger, all right. So this is the right ventricle. You see. So that's one of the things we're going to use to identify the anterior side of the heart. This groove, you'll see it, and it will fall short. It doesn't go to the apex to divide them equally. So the left ventricle is bigger for obvious reasons, right? It's a much bigger muscle too. Why? Why would the left ventricle be much bigger in terms than the right ventricles?
Bring more blood into the heart.
Yeah, okay, why? Why do we need more blood into the left side of the heart than we do on the right side? In actual fact, the ventricle is bigger because the muscle is much thicker too.
It's got to squeeze it all the way to the extremities.
Yeah, it's got to squeeze it all the way to the systemic circulation. The systemic circulation is much more extensive than the pulmonary circulation. Make sense? Right? It just goes to the lungs and back. It's a very small circuit. And besides, you don't want a lot of pressure in the lungs. Why? Why don't you want too much pressure in the lungs? It's going to burst those little bubbles. Remember, the alveoli are very small little balloons, one cell layer thick, very flimsy. If your blood is going there with high pressure, you know, it could burst through, and that would have problems.
And it will clot.
Yeah, it will clot as well, and then you have this accumulation of fluid, like emphysema-like symptoms where you are stuffed in there. You're not going to be doing so. The blood pressure in the lungs has to be turned down a little bit for that reason. But you need higher blood pressure to the systemic circulation because it's dropping all the way to my big toe. It's all the way down there. Right? If you're 7 foot, you get problems because that means you got to really go down. Like that. Okay, very good. All right, and then this is just the other view of the heart, showing the left side with the 4, pulmonary veins coming from the left and right lungs. Okay, and that's that. And then of course, this opening probably for the, the coronary sinus from the heart. Right. So we will actually talk about circulation in the heart itself very soon, because that circulation is important. Because without blood and oxygen and nutrients to the heart muscle, they're not going to be doing the job of beating. Okay, so the atrioventricular valves, which are the valves between the atria and the ventricles, namely tricuspid on the right, bicuspid or mitral valve on the left, prevent backflow into the atria, so they promote unidirectional blood flow going to the ventricles only. Because blood is going to start pulling in the systemic circulation, pulling in the pulmonary circulation if it's not being pumped into the ventricles and going in one direction. Okay, so ensure. So another thing you kind of had trouble identifying is these parts, these valves as well. All right. So know these valves, know the function of the valves, know between which structures of the heart those valves are located. Okay. And most of the time the name kind of tells you where it is, except maybe one or two. Atrioventricular, it means it's between the atrium and the ventricles. All right. AV valves, tricuspid, and the bicuspid. Tricuspid on the right side, bicuspid on the left side. The left side usually has less, so it's got 2 cusps, and the right side usually has more. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Use whatever you can, but
Not like a shorter word, and so it's by.
By. Okay, that's
And
another
try
little
is
trick.
longer.
Then
Right.
right. Yeah. Another thing you can use, okay? Whatever floats your boat. But tricuspid on the right, bicuspid on the left. And of course, putting the back into the atria. And then The chordae tendini, these are those little strings I was talking about that are attached to the papillary muscles and also to the cusps. It's like a parachute. You know, a parachute has got the strings. Those strings will be the chordae tendini, and then the parachute will be the cusps of the valves. You know what happens to the parachute when it fills up with air? It expands. Same thing when those cusps fill up with blood. They will expand, and soon enough the flap will come up against each other like that, and that creates the heart sound, the first heart sound. And then they close up. And then those chordae tendini attached to the papillary muscles will tug a little bit on it so that it doesn't prolapse all the way back into the atrium. Especially in some people that they have a problem like that. So their chordae tendini maybe are not attached properly, or they're missing some, or something like that, or the papillary muscles are not strong enough to pull on the force, and then the cusps are prolapsing back into the atria, and then blood is kind of going back. And then you have problems. And people actually get valve transplants when those valves are not operating properly, especially pig heart valves. We use that, they work well with us. So, go figure, the pig that we say, oh, the pig got all the demons, but you know, but it's got heart valves that we use. When humans do valve transplant, they use the pig hearts valves. Okay. So anyway, chordae tendini prevents those cusps from prolapsing in there, and they're attached to the papillary muscles, which kind of contract a little bit whenever the cusps fill with blood. They're just like parachutes. So you can imagine the atrioventricular valves will create the first heart sound. When the flap comes against each other like this, as the valves close, and then that forms the first heart sound, the dark sound. Okay, all right. First heart sound, not high school. First heart sound. Okay, and then the tricuspid valve on the right side, bicuspid on the left. Okay, so just know that. Know all these structures: trabecular canyon, muscular pectinate, chordae tendini, the papillary muscles, and then the valves, tricuspid right, bicuspid left, right? Because when you know those structures, guess what else you're gonna know? The flow of blood through the heart. Just knowing that it starts on the right side and then comes out to the lungs, comes back on the left, and then goes out to the systemic on the left. Then you will know the structures and be able to make that. All right? And then we've got another set of valves in the pulmonary trunk and the aorta called semilunar valves, because the cusps look like half moons. All right? And so there will be 3 of them like that. All right? And then they fill up with blood when, after the ventricles contract, the tricuspid and the bicuspid valve close, right? Because the blood will kind of go up there. And then they will force open the semilunar valves because the pressure is so high. It's going to force, and the orientation of that cusp is that they're faced up like this. The orientation of the tricuspid and bicuspid, they're facing down like that because blood is coming down there when the ventricles contract. So when these ones, because they are faced like this, the force of blood will force it through. They're going to open up and go through. So when the ventricles stop contracting, what do the semilunar valves do? The blood will start to back into the ventricles, and they fill up with blood, and they close up, forming the second heart sound called dump. Because it's kind of like a splash of blood onto those cusps facing up like that. Right? Second heart sound, semilunar valves. Because I might just ask you in the exam, okay, what creates the first heart sound? And where is this complicated? Right? First heart sound, atrioventricular valve between the atria and the ventricles. Happens when the ventricles contract. First heart sound does. Second heart sound happens when the ventricles do what?
The semilunar.
Yeah, the second heart sound comes when the ventricles do what?
When they stop contracting.
Yeah, when they relax. Yeah. Because then when they relax, blood will try to come back into the ventricles, and then the cusps are facing up, it will fill up, and then boom, form the second heart sound. Okay, so second heart sound occurs when the ventricles are relaxing, and the first heart sound occurs when the ventricles are contracting. Do you see now? So there's going to be two of these semilunar valves, right? The aortic semilunar valve in the aorta and the pulmonary semilunar valve in the pulmonary trunk, right? Pulmonary trunk is feeding to the pulmonary circulation, and the aorta is feeding to the systemic circulation. When the blood enters the arteries, right? Remember, the arteries are very elastic. Okay, we're gonna see this when we do the ECG with our electrophysiology equipment, because when the especially thick walls of the aorta, because they are very elastic, they actually contract with so much force, it feels as if the heart is just beat again. And that creates the dichrotic notch, and you'll be able to see it on the pumps. You'll see the pressure goes up, and then it goes up again. There's a little notch called the dichrotic notch, and that is just due to the recoil of the elastic arteries. And you'll be able to see that when we measure electrical activity in the heart very soon. All right? Anyway, so semilunar valves and atrioventricular valves. So the semilunar valves are in the aorta and the pulmonary trunk. They prevent blood flow into the ventricles. Right. The atrioventricular valves prevent blood flow into the atrium. Exactly. You know what's responsible for the first heart sound and what's happening at that time, what's responsible for the second heart sound and what's happening at that time, and which valves are causing that sound. Right? Because I'm going to need you to know that stuff and be able to explain that to you. Right? And then another wall, of course, you can see here, superior and inferior vena cava, and then of course the coronary sinus opens into the atria right there, and then of course you got your chordae tendineae and your cusps, papillary muscles, and then of course your trabecular cani, right? And then of course the four pulmonary veins coming from the lungs on the left side, and then of course the semilunar valves in the pulmonary trunk, semilunar valves in the aorta. Right? All right, so this is just an actual picture of the heart, with the dissection of the human heart. And you can see surrounding the atrioventricular valves and also surrounding the semilunar valves is really a very fibrous tissue called the fibroskeleton, or the skeleton of the heart, and it kind of anchors these valves in place. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And you can see the importance of those in a little bit when we talk about it. So this is just showing you the function of the heart. In this, number one, blood, we are on the left side here. Blood is coming from the lungs, and it's filling up the left atrium. And of course, because blood is coming and filling this up, it's going to open the bicuspid valve, right? And blood flows in. In fact, 3/4 of the filling of the ventricle occurs when the atria are relaxed. Because just blood, the atria are smaller chambers, right? And just blood is coming back to it. And I mean, because the blood has got force coming into the, it's not going to sort of back up in there. It's just going to open up the path of least resistance, and then it's going to start to fill up the ventricles. So only about another quarter is filled up when the atria actually contract. Because the atria are not big chambers that can hold up a lot of blood. You see what I'm saying? So the ventricles are really filling when the atria are just relaxed. Most of the filling occurs when the atria are relaxed. Okay? And then of course, because blood here, is just filling up, it's not enough pressure to open these, so blood is just going to fill up this. So that's the number one, with the ventricles relaxed. And here, when the ventricle is, this is happening simultaneously. We're just looking at the left side, remember? These things is happening at the same time. So what happens on the left is exactly what happens on the right. So, okay, so we just need to talk about the one side. So because of the orientation of the atrioventricular valves, when these contract, the ventricles, they're going to force blood up the cusps, and then the cusps are going to fill up with blood and close up. All right, and then these papillary muscles in the chordae tendineae will resist the backflow into the atrial prolapse into the atrium. And then because the pressure is now much greater, it's going to push through here and open the semilunar valves in the aorta and the pulmonary trunk. In this case, it's going to be the aorta because we're on the left side. All right? And then blood is going to flow out through the semilunar valve, aortic semilunar valve. All right? Only when these relax is blood going to try to come back, and then it's going to be stopped by the semilunar valves. When the cusps oriented upwards, start to fill up with blood, boom, it goes up. Just like a parachute does when it fills with air. It's going to do that. All right? So, flow through the heart. All right? So this is the thing I was talking about having, you guys having problems with. Blood is coming to the right side. All right? I mean, it's happening simultaneously, but blood comes to the right side from the systemic circulation via the superior inferior vena cava, the coronary sinus. Goes into the right atrium, passes through the tricuspid valve on the right side, enters the right ventricle, and then passes through the pulmonary semilunar valves. Yeah, but it goes to the pulmonary trunk. So it goes through the pulmonary semilunar valve, then it enters the pulmonary trunk, and then goes to the lungs, left and right pulmonary arteries, comes back through those 4 pulmonary veins to the left side, to the left atrium, then goes through the bicuspid or mitral valve. Okay, I will show you a diagram which is how all these things again. I'm just kind of sort of going through it right now so you can visualize it, and then I'll show you a diagram, and then we can go through it again for the second time. Because the flow through the heart, I want to cover that, of blood, right? So, comes through the left side, through the pulmonary veins, and then goes through the mitral valve, bicuspid into the left ventricle, then goes through the aortic semilunar valves. Aortic semilunar valves are deposited into the aorta, and then blood goes to the systemic circulation. Alright? Again, like I said, these things are going on at the same time. So the atria are contracting at the same time, the ventricles are contracting at the same time. Alright? And then of course blood returns to the left atrium from the lung, and then it's pumped back to the blood. But here I kind of sort of went through all the structures because I knew you kind of had problems with that, so I wanted to kind of preempt and follow through all the structures. But right now we're just talking blood coming into the right side, going to the lungs, and then coming back to the left side and going to the body. That's all this is saying right now. But I went through all the structures like this is your picture, they can pass. Right? So we get the blood coming in through here. Number 1, we get the superior vena cava, we get the inferior vena cava, and we've got the coronary sinus depositing blood into the right atrium. Goes through the tricuspid valve, right? And then the ventricles will contract. Goes through the semilunar valve, pulmonary semilunar valve, right? Pulmonary trunk. And then into the pulmonary trunk, goes to the lungs, picks up a bunch of oxygen, comes back through the 4 pulmonary veins, right? So that's number 5, and then goes through the bicuspid or mitral valve, if you like, if that floats your boat, because it looks like a priest mitre, the head that a priest wears. So, and then goes into the left ventricle, right? Left ventricle, number 7, it will go through the aortic semilunar valve. Aortic semilunar valve before it gets into the aorta. All right, and then it goes to the rest of the body. All right. So here we did the pulmonary circulation from the pulmonary trunk over there. The pulmonary veins, 4 of them, okay, will lead to the left atrium, and then the bicuspid valve, or mitral valve, and then left ventricle, and then aortic semilunar valves goes to the aorta, and then coronary arteries are also located right in the aorta too, to go away to the coronary circulation, to the heart muscle itself, because it's going to really need a bunch of oxygen and nutrients if it's going to be contracting all your life without resting. Okay, so it goes to the coronary circulation, which you can say is the number 1 circulation, and then comes back through the cardiac veins, and then the cardiac veins lead to the coronary sinus, and the coronary sinus deposits into the right atrium. All right, and also the blood that goes to the systemic circulation. All right, those are the three circulations of the where blood is sent to through the inferior from the body, lower extremities, and the head through, and the shoulders and whatnot through the superior vena cava comes into the right atrium, and then the process starts again. Your heart is beating your heart. Okay, so that's what it is. Okay, right side, pulmonary, goes to the pulmonary circulation through, so it comes back superior, inferior vena cava, coronary sinus, deposits into the right atrium, then goes through the tricuspid into the right ventricle, goes through the pulmonary single valve, going to the pulmonary trunk to the lungs, and then comes back from the pulmonary circulation through the 4 pulmonary veins that leads to the left atrium, and then goes through the bicuspid valve. It's an atrioventricular valve, then goes to the left ventricle. Then aortic semilunar valve. If you say semilunar valve, you get a half a point because there's 2 of them. So in this case, it's going through the aortic semilunar valve on the left side, going to the rest of the body, and then it starts again. Okay, so that's the flow of blood through. So if I was to have you track a red blood cell, coming to the right side, you'll be able to turn where it goes and then it comes back. All right, and the structures through which it passes. All right. So the coronary arteries, of course, will branch off from the aorta and supply the heart muscle itself. All right. So the heart muscle has got the right side of it and the left side of it. All right. So on the right side, okay. So you've got the right coronary artery. We're talking about blood going to the heart muscle. We have circulated blood into the systemic circulation, pulmonary circulation. Now we're doing the coronary circulation right into the heart muscle. So the right coronary artery, we're going to need the blood to go into the atria and the ventricles, right? Because the atrial muscles, we get ventricular muscles. All right. So blood goes through the coronary artery. On the right side, it goes to the marginal artery. Goes through the marginal artery, and it's gonna supply the atria and the ventricles. Okay? And then blood is gonna proceed through the anterior. Okay? And posterior. Posterior. On the right side is the posterior, right? So, posterior meaning behind, posterior interventricular artery, okay? Interventricular artery. And this is supplying only the ventricles. Okay? Why do you think that is, right? Ventricles, much bigger muscle, okay? Marginal artery provides both the atria and the ventricles, but there's one that's going to really supply all the ventricular muscle because the ventricles are much bigger muscle. All right? All right? And then after the ventricles, it goes into the cardiac veins. Cardiac vein. Okay? And then it goes through the coronary sinus. Back into the
Right side, right.
yeah, right there where the superior of them are doing that. So the left side, okay, so the left side is got the left coronary artery, okay, and then it will provide the circumflex circumflex artery. And this one will provide the atria and the ventricles. Right? Usually the way I talk about this circumflex left flex kind of sounds the same. The marginal is on the right side. Okay? Since we got the posterior on the right side, then we've got the anterior interventricular artery. And then, of course, the one that has the ventricle in its name will provide only the ventricles. You see that? So this provides the ventricles. Okay? And then from the ventricles on the right side, again, same situation like on the left. It all pulls up in the cardiac veins. And then goes into the coronary sinus. Remember, we've been saying the coronary sinus deposits into the right side, into the atrium. Okay? Because in the exam, sometimes I say, can you talk about the coronary circulation on the left side? Can you show me which blood vessels distribute the blood on the right side and where the blood is going to? Then you talk about the right side. You've got the marginal artery providing the left and right ventricles. Then you've got the posterior interventricular artery providing just the ventricles, because these are much bigger muscles. Then it goes into the cardiac veins, then it goes into the coronary sinus, which deposits into the right side. On the left, you've got the left coronary artery, right on the left side, then goes into the circumflex. Left circumflex artery provides both the atria and the ventricles, and then blood continues in the anterior interventricular artery, which provides just the ventricles because they're much bigger muscle, and then goes again to the cardiac veins, coronary sinus, back into the right atrium. So I'm going to definitely ask you one of these sides how blood is distributed in the heart, okay? Okay, and the coronary sinus, of course, and the cardiac veins will bring it back to the right side. All right? Very good. This is just an angiogram showing occlusion of one of the coronary arteries, and that's really bad. So what they could do, they normally take like a vein in the leg, and then they put a shunt that comes from where it's open to the other part where it's open. It looks like it's still kind of closed over here, so the shunt will be going here. Okay? That's what they call it, bypass. It will bypass the block.
Do they cut the block out or do they do that?
I was thinking about that actually. Nice of you to bring that question up. I would leave it there. You know what I'm saying? Because in case it opens, for starters, blood will go through for some reason. But in case your vein gets blocked or something screwy happens, it doesn't catch on, you still have the original. You know what I'm saying? They might cut it, I don't know, because, but I was thinking about that. Because sometimes if you cut it, the advantage of that is that, the material that's blocking it, usually it's stuck there. It's not really going anywhere, okay? So if you cut it, you would have to kind of close the end, one of those, you know what I'm saying? And then it would be too much work. If I was the surgeon, I would kind of leave it like, you know what I'm saying?
It might cause more damage.
Yeah, it might cause more damage, because if I cut it, let's say I cut it here, that means I'll have to close that up. It may have a leakage. If something screwy happens, but you know what I'm saying? So to minimize my damage here, I would just put one from here, shunt it, and go to the where it's open, where it's patterned, and call it a day. Less surgery, less time opening the patient, goes faster. Because if you have to repair the part where you closed, and if you make a mistake, not good. The less chances you have of making a mistake, the less mistakes you're gonna make. Right? Makes sense?
Good.
Yeah. It's a good thing. You brought another question that I like. I'm going to ask in the exam. Actually, I give you bonus points for it. Remember when I was talking about smelling, I was like, you spray your cologne in your armpits? There's actually a good reason why, a good physiological reason, which I want you guys to start thinking about, because I'm going to ask it in your exam. you asked one of these days. Remember when we were talking about smell, and you said, you know, the special senses. We're talking about smell. Remember at the beginning of the term, and I was saying when you spray your cologne or whatever, and I was going into the armpits, and you're like, why the armpits? You said you don't remember, you forgot, but I do
Are
remember.
you sure it was me?
It was you, but it's a good thing, okay? I like the questions you ask because they're provocative. They cause you to think. There's actually a good reason why you put cologne and roll on in your armpits. Think about that reason. There is a very good reason why. And I want you to be able to tell me. And you get bonus points. Yeah, you get bonus points for that. You asked it, and that's a good question. It's not a bad thing. It's excellent. Okay, so let's move on before we get too excited about the armpits and the smell. Okay, this is the heart fibrous skeleton I was talking about. You know, that surrounds the atrioventricular valves and the semilunar valves. So there's two semilunar valves, two atrioventricular valves. So you kind of have this deal here where you have kind of something like this. So, and then you have, you know, these are the deals. So the atrioventricular valves, semilunar valves, and so forth. So around this is a very, very, very tough connective tissue surrounding these valves. Kind of anchors them in place, right? You can imagine if force is forcing the atrioventricular up, force is forcing the semilunar valves down like that, they're going to move. So they need to be anchored right in place so that they don't do none of that. So that fibrous skeleton is very important for that. Okay? And then also it will separate the atria muscle and the, because you don't want cross-contamination here, you don't want you know, excitation of like the ventricles, you know, before the atria are contracted fully. You have to contract the atria first, and the finish contraction, only then do the ventricles start to contract. So there's going to be electroinstillation too. Okay, and then and the fibrous skeleton will provide a place to anchor, you know, the muscles and then the heart.
And they have to be pretty tough because it beats all day long.
Yeah, very tough.
How many beats a day?
I don't know, man. I know it's about 60 beats a minute, you know, and how many minutes in a day? 60 minutes in an hour.
Yeah.
So 60, you know, times 24 hours in a day, times 60 beats in a minute. Okay, you can do the math. It's a lot of beats. You can actually calculate that and tell me next time. Or now, right now with your knee. So those that fibrous skeleton is very important for that. It anchors, electrical insulates the atria, the ventricles. Very important. Provide a point of attachment for the muscles. Okay, because if I ask you what are the functions of the fibrous skeleton of the heart, you're going to talk to me about anchoring the valves. You're going to talk to me about insulating the atria from the ventricles. Okay, you're going to talk to me about attachment of muscles. Okay, for the atrial muscles and the ventricular muscles.
86,400 beats.
There you go.
That's a lot.
So
A
that's
lot of beating.
like if you don't do any exercise or anything.
I do exercise every morning, and I'm running, and my heart is going even much more than that. Okay, so it beats a lot more. But the good thing about doing that is that your heart gets trained. Like my resting heart rate is less than 60, because you know my heart is used to beating much faster. So when I'm resting, it's not even hardly doing anything. It's like what you got, nothing on me. So my heart rate is lower than 60, 59 or so, sometimes 57. Okay, usually conditioned athletes you get that. Okay, so gotta tell me about all the functions of the fibrous skeleton. Very important, right? Especially when you're beating 84,000 times a day. Plus or minus. All right, there you go. Okay, so cardiac muscle cells. This is where you have problems with them. You know, oh my goodness. So we get they're branched, and we talked about why the branching occurs, because the cardiac muscle kind of contracts in circular motions and so forth, and so it's going to do that. It's going to be branched. The fibers are going to have to be oriented in many kinds of directions. So it's also organized, though. It's striated with the actin and the myosin filaments, because it still does the same contraction. So they have to be organized. Okay, so these are the characteristics that the module asked about. So they are organized. The two tubules and the sarcoplasmic reticulum is not as well organized as in skeletal muscle. Why is that? Why are the T tubules and the sarcoplasmic reticulum not as well organized as in the skeletal muscles? It's a functional thing. It's to do with the functional. It is to do with the. It's a structural thing about heart muscle that affects their function. What is that we said connects heart muscle cells? Intercalated discs, right? And what do say intercalated discs have? They've got channels on them, right? So when the heart muscle is passing electrical activity, those channels help us to spread the impulse so that the heart muscle contracts as one, as a functional syncytium. So because of that, you don't need a well-organized tubular system that provides the calcium. You know, the calcium that attaches to the troponin to cause that contraction to happen. You don't need a very well-organized T-tubule system, because the T-tubule system is the invaginations of the membrane that go into the muscle to distribute the impulse. If you've got the intercalated discs, you don't need that well-organized. So I'm going to ask you in the exam, why is it that cardiac muscle do not have well-organized T-tubules and the sarcoplasmic reticulum? Okay, first you got to know what the T-tubule is, you got to know what the sarcoplasmic reticulum is and what it does, all right? So the T-tubule spreads the impulse. You've got intercalated discs, so you don't need it to be well organized as in the skeletal muscles, all right? Because the skeletal muscles do not have the intercalated discs, all right? And then, of course, the normal contraction depends on the calcium, and the calcium is stored in the sarcoplasmic reticulum, okay? All right? And then, of course, the heart muscle will only have oxidative phosphorylation, so it has a bunch of mitochondria for energy. Okay, it's only aerobic respiration in the heart. You understand? So what you need a lot of aerobic respiration means you need what? Aerobic is oxygen. So you need a whole bunch of blood vessels in there too. A whole bunch of blood vessels, a whole bunch of oxygen. So you need blood. That coronary circulation we're talking about is very important. It's vital, I mean, so to say. I mean, if you're going to be beating 84,000 times a day without stopping until you die, go figure. So, and oxidative phosphorylation provides the most energy from anaerobic. So that's why it has to be oxidative phosphorylation. You've got a lot of blood vessels in there, good network of capillaries, and then you've got a bunch of blood goes in there. So intercalated discs are the reason why. Okay, I'm going to fall down here because I'm trying to. Okay, so gotta know those reasons, and then there is the muscle, heart muscle, intercalated discs, the branching, and so forth. All right. I'm gonna skip through this because it just shows how the calcium comes out and then perfuses the heart muscle and so forth. Okay. So we're gonna go through this, and you can watch it when I post it over there. So the newborn, of course, receives oxygen, deposits its waste into the maternal circulation. So therefore, it's not breathing, the lungs are not working, and therefore the liver that detoxifies the blood is not working, because all the waste and everything goes to the mom and the mom gets rid of it. Okay, so you're going to need to divert the liver, you're going to need to divert the lungs, at least in utero. Okay, so that's what the fetal cardiovascular adaptations are, all right? And that's what we will talk about, all right? So blood comes in through the umbilical vein, carrying oxygenated blood. That's why it's red, all right? Okay, and then I'm going to go them in that order from the mom. Okay, I'm not going to go in this order. It doesn't make sense in terms of trying to study this. Okay, so I'm going to go in the actual flow of blood. Makes more sense. Okay, umbilical vein carries blood, from the mom, from the placenta, and then goes through the ductus venosus. It connects this vein, umbilical vein, to the vena cava, inferior vena cava. So that's why it's called the ductus venosus. Okay, ductus venosus, and then blood bypasses the liver because the liver is not working. Goes in here. You see how it becomes red up here, the inferior vena cava, because it's getting oxygenated blood. It goes into the right atrium as usual because that's where the inferior vena cava deposits. And then it's instead of going through here, it goes through the foramen ovale. That will shunt blood from the right atrium to the left atrium. Okay? All right? Okay, a bit of the blood will escape and still go to the right ventricle, right? And then we'll try to go to the pulmonary trunk, okay, to go to the lungs. And then the ductus arteriosus will connect the pulmonary trunk, which is an artery, to the aorta, which is another artery. Ductus arteriosus, right? As opposed to ductus venosus, which attaches two veins. So the ductus venosus shunts blood from the pulmonary trunk back into the, which is what they talked about first, back into the aorta, and then the aorta takes blood to the heart, I mean, to the rest of the body, okay? And to the heart too. Yeah, into the coronary artery will take blood to the heart too. Remember? Coronary circulation. And then it will go to the body, and then comes down the abdominal aorta, and then, by then the blood is getting used up with oxygen, and then these umbilical arteries will carry blood back to the mouth, carrying deoxygenated blood. Okay, so those are the adaptations to bypass the lungs and the, so those are them. Okay, and then when the baby is born, the foramen ovale closes up, which connects the right and the left atrium, becomes the fossa ovalis. Okay, this is what happens immediately after birth. And then the ductus arteriosus, which connected the pulmonary trunk to the aorta, closes up. Because now the pulmonary circulation blood pressure is going to go up a little bit, and blood is going to go to the lung once the infant takes their first breath, the neonate, the newborn. All right, so blood will go to the lungs. All right, and then the ductus venosus becomes the ligamentum venosum. All right, and it was shunting blood from the umbilical vein into the inferior vena cava. So that will stop. Blood is no longer bypassing the liver. Blood is going to go to the liver because it's going to start to do the work. All right, and then the umbilical vein also closes, because the placenta has been hooked off, you know. And then it becomes the round ligament of the liver, or sometimes called ligamentum teres. Okay? The umbilical vein becomes the round ligament of the liver, or the ligamentum teres. And then the umbilical arteries that were taking deoxygenated blood back to the placenta will just become the cords of the arteries. They just become sort of fibrous cords. Okay? So, gotta know all these changes that occur soon after birth. All right, and these are them. All those changes I talked about. All right, the ductus venosus becomes the ductus, the ligamentum venosum. Right, the umbilical vein becomes the round ligament of the liver, or the ligamentum teres. All right, fossa ovalis was the foramen ovale, and ligamentum arteriosum was the ductus arteriosus, right? And you're no longer bypassing the liver, you're no longer bypassing the lungs. Okay, so those are them. And that's it. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. So I just need you to know about the fetal circulation. What are the adaptations that the fetus has to do, and what are the changes, cardiovascular changes that occur. Of course, many things also happen, changes to the digestive system, to the respiratory system, and then to the cardiovascular system as soon as the baby is born. Okay, thank you guys, I appreciate it. I'll give you 5 in the lab, okay? So we meet at 5 past. Thank you.